Hey there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. This weekend, I got to attend one of my local theaters where I was able to see all 8 of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Wanted to go over how that went and share my thoughts on the franchise with you, including an overall ranking. So, the theater I went to is Screenland Armour in Kansas City, Missouri. They are an incredible, small, independent, locally owned theater that is able to show a whole bunch of, repertory cinema. They do a lot of special events here. For example, this is also where I witnessed the entire Grindhouse experience with all the fake trailers and everything just last month. And later on in October, I am going to be able to see Suspiria, which is why I'm wearing this Suspiria hoodie with Goblin playing the score live, and that is going on tour. So make sure you're checking out dates. Might be playing near you, and you might want to go check it out. But this was the kickoff event for the 31 days of Halloween at this theater that they call Shocktober. So this was right outside my theater as I showed up. This event started at 10 a.m. So I got there nice and early, right about 9:30 a.m. ish to get started. So this theater hosts a lot of events. They even have a little bar associated with it, and they do all kinds of small events there as well. This is an example of one. Every month they show a VHS tape film in this little bar, and just a pretty cool thing coming up. They're showing Winter Beast on VHS in this little rewind bar. I love stuff like this, and I would love to get more opportunities to go to someplace like this. Seeing Winter Beast in a bar with a bunch of people that like something like that sounds like a wicked Sunday. I've gone to a whole lot of special events here. I was able to go view the Jay and Silent Bob reboot tour where Kevin Smith came and watched the film. I think there was a small Q&A with that. Adam Green came and showed Victor Crowley when he released that, did a Q&A, sold some props and stuff. But this theater is gorgeous. Here's what it looks like on the inside. This is where I was sitting before the entire thing started. They have a full-on curtain, and this little guy on the right here, he actually cranks it open. I love the way that it's set up. It feels very authentic. It's just something that you go to, and it feels like you're here for an event. It feels very special. So my plan for this event, I would have loved to have taken my wife. Unfortunately, 2 young kids, she had to stay home and watch them. And I invited my friend and other YouTuber, KB from KB Loves Movies. Here is his channel, and as you're looking at that, may I, throw your attention at this spooky season conversation from where he and I recorded this. It is a really fun discussion on horror, and KB has some really interesting taste, and we get into some discussion that I think might be pretty interesting for a lot of people. So with KB, I was just planning on spending the day, just the two of us. And as we are sitting here deep in conversation, out of nowhere, a friend from the St. Louis area who is a viewer of the channel, patron of the channel, out of nowhere, nerd of the 80s from the chat, shows up and surprises me, had already bought a ticket and a hotel room. And we hung out all day, just the 3 of us, to watch these films. And there is so much that comes from a franchise watch like this, because it's basically going to be a reevaluation of all kinds of films that you love. Usually, most people going to view this are not going to be first-time watches. Fortunately for us, Cam, who is nerd of the 80s, this was his first-time watch of everything besides Freddy versus Jason. So as we are sitting here all day watching this, Cam had some of the most wild, loud, hilarious reactions to so many things that he was seeing for the first time ever. It was just so much fun to see somebody new reacting to these scenes. I loved that aspect of this. Now myself, I had seen all these movies before. For a few of them, it had been quite some time. I knew which ones that I loved the most, and that didn't change this time. However, I had most of them grow in appreciation. There's a few that are fairly so-so. But I wanted to throw a few things out about this franchise because I feel like this franchise gets sort of not necessarily maligned, but not nearly as appreciated as some of the other bigger slasher titles like your Halloweens or Friday the 13th. And that doesn't make much sense to me. The reason being, those other franchises, they get sort of lost in so many different aspects. And Nightmare on Elm Street is special. It's the same person playing the villain the entire way through, which is fairly unique. I think the only one that may compete with it would be like a Child's Play. The lore in Nightmare on Elm Street is, for the most part, very consistent throughout the entire series. And again, Child's Play is probably the only thing that comes even remarkably close. But with something like Halloween, with different people playing Michael Myers, or Friday the 13th, with not only different people playing Jason, but in it, I mean, Jason doesn't even really get created till about the third film. There is somebody pretending to be Jason in one of the films. Jason dies and comes back, and I understand that there's literally a film called Freddy's Dead, and then there's another Freddy movie, but it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. It is all done within the lore in a really nice, unique way. But somehow, like, we always get shirts for Halloween. We always get shirts for Friday the 13th. We always get nice posters and merch for some of these other films. Even something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets tons of love associated with it, and it deserves that. And I'm not trying to take away from these other films, just trying to exalt the fact that A Nightmare on Elm Street is worthy of your love and praise as well. So, a franchise ranking. I think that that's something that's fun to do. I don't think that my opinion is a consensus opinion. I don't think that my opinion is better than anybody's opinions. But the most important thing, I don't think any of these movies are really bad. A couple of them are not great, but I enjoy aspects of literally all of these. So let's break them down and do an actual tier list. So the first one, I loved seeing this in the theater. This movie is great. There is a lot of subtle comedy in the first one that I totally forgot. And even though I've seen this movie so many times, it just hit nice having it be in a theater on a big screen. And I loved seeing it this way with the crowd that loves it. So, Nightmare on Elm Street, obviously this is an S-tier film. This is a wonderful slasher movie, great premise, super unique, and just a beautifully fleshed out villain right from the get-go, played by Robert Englund magnificently. So, the second one, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This is one that has definitely been looked down on for quite some time. This is a movie that has been called so many different names under the sun. This is a movie that shows Freddy Krueger at his maybe most sinister, other than the seventh entry in this franchise. And this movie, it really goes there. It's got some great practical effects, a performance by Mark Patton that I found out during this event that he grew up literally within a couple blocks of where we were seeing this movie. So that was a cool aside. But this movie is great, and it's been getting a lot of praise recently because there was a documentary made about it. Well, primarily about Mark Patton, but really looking at this entire film called Scream Queen. And this movie is just good, and it's one that people should watch, which is why I need to put it in A tier. This is a wonderful movie and absolutely should go down as one of the top in the series. But the next one, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. This is many people's favorite overall. This is one that is an entry to the franchise where Freddy starts to get a little comical and jokey. This is where we get famous scenes like Welcome to Primetime, Bitch, and possibly my favorite death in the entire franchise, the marionette death. It is just brutal. It is hard to watch. It is a remarkable movie, and we get Heather Langenkamp back, and she is great in this movie. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, to no surprise, this goes straight to S tier. I do think that the first one is better, which is why it is showing higher here, but the third one is a wonderful entry into this franchise, and one that I am just glad that they continued going after the, lukewarm response to A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And that takes us to A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. This is the first one that is sort of a giant fall off the cliff for me. This is not a wonderful movie. This is a very fun movie, and one that I do think is good, but not great. This movie has, again, a lot of great practical effects. It has an odd ending to it that is a little scattered, but I do understand that horror endings are a little difficult to pull off the right way, even though quite a few of these movies really do pull it off nicely. Unfortunately, this one is going to end up in my C tier. This movie is one that I get the people that hate it and think that it's straight, a bad movie. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do understand how you could look down on this one for sure. So that brings us to A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 from 1989. This is The Dream Child. Now, this one has some interesting takes. At the very beginning, we see some odd little animatronics and odd practical effects for this little child shape. However, this movie is about on par with the fourth one for me. So I'm going to put it here. It is slightly a down step from part 4. It is a movie that is not nearly as good as the rest in this franchise. Again, I understand the people that sort of checked out in the middle of this one because, as we'll talk about in a second, parts 4, 5, and 6 really kind of lost each other throughout all of it. And I get that aspect. I get falling out of love with this franchise right in the middle of it. That being said, it's still very fun, and it's still one that I hope more people actually pay attention to, because again, a lot of people just don't discuss these nowadays. It's mostly given to other villains. The next one, this is Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. This is the 6th entry into this franchise, and one that really turns into this almost insulting mess compared to the first film in the franchise. Not to overlong this, but this is going to go in the D tier for me. This is the worst movie in this franchise by far, unless we start talking about the remake. And as you are paying attention to how everything has gone with this franchise, I get not necessarily liking this one. We see so many different things happen in this movie that don't make a lot of sense, and it is the one that feels the most disjointed. And most of these movies have some pretty egregious plot holes, but this one seems to really languish in those potholes. It is a sequel that just sort of exists, and even then, it's barely. Part 6 also has some of the most odd storylines throughout any of these. This one actually has a pretty interesting cast. We've got Lisa Zane in this one. We've got Breckin Meyer. We've got Yaphet Kotto, Tom Arnold, and Roseanne Barr making an appearance in this one. This one just messy. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm still glad it's there, and I still think it adds appropriately to the lore in a lot of scenes, but not quite a great movie. Now, the next one. So, in the length of this franchise, I completely understand, like I said, the people that checked out and thought that this was going to be the last of them, because basically it led to like I said earlier, a steep dive off of a cliff in terms of quality. It is one that doesn't, have. This franchise makes a lot of bold moves, but I think one of their most bold is in this next one, which part 7 is New Nightmare. So many people like this film. Many people are happy with this film, which came out of nowhere compared to the last 3, obviously. I am personally going to place it in A tier above Freddy's Revenge. This movie, I think, it paved the perfect way for Scream. Wes Craven came back. Heather Langenkamp came back again. We got other actors from the first film that came back to make even short appearances. Very meta film. Freddy Krueger being more sinister than he's ever been, and just a wonderful addition to this franchise and a new revitalization. The last one that is shown here on this tier list is the remake. Fortunately, they did not show the remake when I watched this over the weekend. That was given to Freddy versus Jason. Now, that movie is just a lot of fun. So we are going to pretend that this icon is for Freddy versus Jason and not the crappy remake. I'm going to put Freddy versus Jason solidly in the B tier. It is nowhere near as good as the movies in A, but it's nowhere near as rough as the movies in C or D. It's an odd choice because it's a versus film, so it's one that is kind of hard to rank against the rest. I had a blast watching it in a theater. I never got a chance to see it in a theater previously, but that is my entire list. So as we recap a little bit, I will zoom in here for you. In S tier, we have the original, followed by Nightmare on Elm Street 3. In A tier, we have New Nightmare, followed by Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. In B tier, that would be Freddy vs. Jason. In C tier, we have Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5. Those are the Dream Master and the Dream Child. And at the bottom of the barrel in D tier, Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare. I think this series deserves another look. I think that this series deserves more attention. I think that A Nightmare on Elm Street is absolutely brilliant in its time, and one that leads to my hope. My hope is that we get one more film featuring Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and I do think he would do it, and I think he would do a great job. He's just waiting on the right script. So as we continue going into the month of October and horror and everything with it, I will only say, from one collector to all of you, have a good night.